Hey, welcome to everyone. Such a pleasure to see you. And we, like the stories from the past two semesters, such great stories. I mean, the birds of spring, great stories. The origin of fungi, great stories. But this is our story, and we fit into the great diversity of life. We are one of the 1.5 million known species. But and I hate to look at this as I do, but as I go through biological groups, the more closely related to me, the more interesting I find it. Like I just like, wow, and the idea to study the human form as it slowly came to be. It is a fascinating story. So I'd like to start on that fascinating story. This is one of our last of this series. Welcome. Hello. Just so you know, next week will be a little bit different in that we'll do a short presentation about geologic time for about a half an hour. And we have three more chairs up front, and there's a room that's propped open next door where we can get more chairs if you need. Um, so geologic time for about a half an hour. But then I put together the back stairway here to more or less try to be like a big museum exhibit. So that as you take a walk up steps, like each step is like 8 million years. And so I'd like to spend the second half of next week's presentation walking with you up the stairs and just kind of, the various time periods we're talking about. Just putting it together in 3 dimensions, like, oh yeah, the first reptiles, they start down there, but the dinosaurs go extinct way up here. Like, I think just being able to see it, I think it's useful. So that will be next week, walking the staircase of time. The week after that will be our last of the spring series. And we are going to have from 5:30 to 6:30 your stories on birding, on pictures you've taken, vacations you've taken, because, as you've known here, I'm happy to say, oh, look, here's a bird that was just at, the Goshen Sanctuary last month, or but you've got great stories, from your bird feeders, from your vacations, from pictures you've taken. So we'd like to highlight those where instead of me talking, it's me saying, oh, you sent me a picture to my email. Let's show that up. And if you wanted to come up and talk about this, for a bit, or talk about your trip, birding trip here, and make it kind of a bird town hall. In addition to that, starting from 5:30 to 6:30, if anyone got here a little bit earlier, starting at 5, I've asked representatives from both the Bashkill Area Association's board and Orange County Audubon to be here as well. So, here are local environmental organizations that can speak about themselves, but then, you can ask questions. I mean, welcome, grab a chair. You could ask questions, interact, like, hey, I saw this bird, I had a question, or I go hiking here, So, a way of getting you more in touch with, people from your local environmental organizations. But the focus of tonight is human evolution. When we last left our heroes, and for anyone who wasn't here when we last left our heroes, we went through the different kinds of mammals. All right, so we talked about how mammals evolved in the starting with mammal-like reptiles in the late Paleozoic. We get the first mammals early in the Mesozoic. We get live-bearing mammals by the late Mesozoic, and then the dinosaurs die. And then we talked briefly about how we got whales and horses, and we left one group out. All right, today we'd like to fix that, and we'd like to talk about the last group, the primates. So starting now, we'd like to go through primates and maybe hopefully make this abbreviated. As you know, I have a YouTube channel, so all my videos are there if you'd like to see. We have chairs here, and I'm sure you can drag one from the room next door. Please don't stand through all this. We can make you comfortable. And so we'd like to now start with the last group that we did not study, the primates. Okay, so something that you will get sick of, but I'm sorry, I'll make you sick of it anyway. In a series of videos that I've been doing, we have the human skull all the way up in the right-hand corner. And we did this a little earlier with the reptiles, etc. We could start with something like this. So what's going on here, if you forget from when we did this before, is when we started off, everyone was singing that we are alive, we are life, etc. So the bacteria were singing. But then within the group of life, there was a subset, the eukaryotes. So when we talked about those, they were singing. So yeast was singing, but bacteria wasn't. And then a little later, there was a subset, the animals. So the sponge was singing, but the yeast wasn't. So this yellow group kept getting smaller and smaller. So the vertebrates would be a group within that, the tetrapods, the mammals, etc. So here we are at primates. So none of these are primates. All of the ones in yellow are. All of the primates are more closely related to each other genetically and anatomically than they are to anything else. We are a group, we are kin. Biologically, primates arose once. We have more common with each other than we do with anything else. Now, unfortunately for you, you're going to hear that song again, but each time you hear the song, the yellow bar will get closer and closer until we are the only ones remaining. All right. So there are rules. The rules are you just can't go calling stuff like primates or like there's rules like primates mean something. So if I say something's a primate, there are features that it has. So for example, the cheekbone, the zygomatic bone, touches here and forms a bony bar around the eye, a postorbital bar. Primates have it, non-primates, at least started off, they didn't. Now, a couple groups got it on their own separately from us, like camels did, but that's other questions. And then one of the reasons is we like to protect our eyes. Eyes are important for us. Lots of mammals only come out at night. Vision isn't that big a thing for a mouse. All right, its visual world is, this close to its face. So it's got these little eyes it doesn't need to protect. But we started protecting our eyes. We face them forward. Because let's face it, if you're jumping to the next branch, all right, well, seeing that branch and, in a way that you're going to grasp it and prevent yourself from falling to death, that's important. So forward facing eyes. Who needs eyes facing this way if, grabbing this branch is the most immediately important thing to you? There are so many things, not going to go through all of this, but we could talk about the nervous system. So here, this voluntary control that I have over my digits, my brain is sending messages through something called a corticospinal tract. Prior to primates, it didn't really go down very far. All right, this tract just ends, right around here, but in primates, it goes further down. So we could talk about the nervous systems of primates share features. All right, so like the cerebrum gets bigger. The visual part of the cerebrum gets bigger. There are certain folds which primates have. Teeth. All right. Primates start reducing their teeth. This has become important. Like if you were looking at a possum, look at the incisors, 4 incisors. All right. Look at all of the premolars and molars, 3 premolars, 4 molars. The first primates have this tooth count. Now this becomes important because we're going to be looking at different groups of primates. 2, 1, 3, 3, 2 incisors, 1 canine, 3 premolars, 3 molars. Now we have 1 less than that, but we'll get to that. And just, here's a little aside, but I'm in Orange County, so I might as well talk about this. The whole postorbital bar thing. The ancient reptiles, they knew, hey, you protect your eye with a bony bar. They did that. But the first mammals, these little things, all right, they hung around at night, they lost it. So that's the eye hole, that's the jaw muscle hole, but there's no bar separating them because of bone. Now, just to show you why that would be important, all right, here is an elephant, all right? Now, if you were alive, 1600s, early 1700s, you might not have said that that was an elephant. You might have said that was a really big dude, all right? And just, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, during their day, that was one of the philosophical questions. Are these giants? Were giants real? And if you didn't know your anatomy, you didn't know that's the eye hole, that's the muscle hole, and that's where the postorbital bar should be. You said, oh, that's all jaw muscles. Where's the eye? And you would have looked in the forehead and you would have seen a big hole, which you knowing elephants like I do say, oh, that's where the nostrils are at the base of the trunk. But these people said, look, it's a cyclops with one big central eye. And not only that, they said, clearly, this is what happens. All right, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, so forgive me. I don't like to give this advice. But this is what happens when, sorry, mostly women, when women, you start fraternizing with angels, this is what your kids end up looking like, so don't do that. So, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin grew up in days where like this was the interpretation of this. We now know, no, this is just not a primate. It doesn't have the post-orbital bar. So primates appear only after the dinosaurs are gone, but not the instant that they're gone. There's actually a couple of things that appear first. So there are these things called plesiadapiforms, almost primates, not quite primates. They've got some primate features, but not enough to be a primate. So before there were any primates, things that look a little bit like them. Today, we have a couple of things which are almost primates. One is called a tree shrew. All right, so that is not a primate, but it genetically and anatomically more similar to primates than anything else. So primates were built in stages. And if you're not up on your Cenozoic history, let me just, I don't want to use terms like Eocene if you're not quite sure what's going on. The dinosaurs lived in what's called the Mesozoic era, okay? And then that ends with a big rock falls out of the sky and India was erupting all over the place. And the age of mammals begins at what's called the Paleocene. Now, we don't have mammals alive today from that. Those were foreign mammals, and there were no primates yet. The first primates come in the Eocene. But by the end of the Paleocene, there were those almost primates. So we start getting these plesiadapiforms, almost primates, and by the time we get to the Eocene, there are primates. There was actually got warmer than usual at the end of the Paleocene. So there's kind of like an extinction, not huge, but significant enough. And so a lot of the things that lived in the Paleocene die, and that Eocene sees new groups appear, primates being one of them. So that might have had something to do with it. Anyway, we jump back to primates because by the Eocene, then, by the early Eocene, we have primates. And the primates would not have been monkeys, they would not have been apes, and they certainly wouldn't have been humans. They would have been similar to the lemurs that we see in Madagascar today. Also, there's a couple other ones alive today. There's a Apado, there's an Ai. There's a couple of these primitive primates which we see today, which we call prosimians. They were once, distributed all throughout the world, like here. When we start the age of mammals, the world was warmer and wetter. As we tell the story of humans, we also have to tell the story of the planet because ice ages are going to factor into our history. So the age of mammals starts warm and wet. This was subtropical, and we had primates, not monkeys. We had prosimians, all right, living in North America. As it gets cooler and drier, the primates go. And squirrels today kind of try to do a lot of what primates would have, leaping from branch to branch and having dexterous hands, etc. So notice this is not a monkey, but it is a primate with all of the things. If you care, I don't know if you do, among the prosimians, there's a little one called a tarsier. And if you look here, the lemur, look, it does have bone there, but it doesn't have bone there. So it's protecting its eye, but not too much. Here's a tarsier, and it's protecting its eye even more. And actually, of the prosimians, tarsiers are more closely related to the monkeys, which completely enclose their heads enclose their eye sockets in the back with bone. And so somewhere, yeah. So just here's that tarsier skull once again. So in the Eocene, there were not only prosimians, but ones which were a little more closely related to us. So sorry, it has been too long, all right, without singing. So. By the late Eocene, within the group primates, there is a subgroup called the anthropoid primates. This would include monkeys, apes, and humans, but it would not include lemurs or the Ai or the Apado. So primates from the early Eocene, by the late Eocene, there are these groups. Once again, just as I look at the clock, there are brain regions which unite the anthropoid primates. They have more bone behind their eyes, all sorts of things that we can talk about the genes certainly show that we are more closely related to them. So by the late Eocene, primates look like this, all right? They're little monkeys, a little more in common with us than, say, a lemur would. They spread all throughout the world. But somehow, and I honestly, I don't know how this happened, but we probably never, they get to South America. Now, South America is an island at this time. It used to be, it was joined to Africa for the longest time, forming the giant southern continent, Gondwana. But by now, Gondwana is split. But they're not that far apart, Africa and South America. I don't know how these monkeys got to South America. You know, the model thing is, you know, some huge storm and you got a big tree, you know, goes in the ocean and floats for days. You got little scared monkeys, you know, in the branches. One of them is pregnant. It lands on a beach. The same way that islands are colonized. We don't know how the first member of this group got to that island, all right, from the mainland, you know, in a storm or whatever. Somehow they did. And they spread throughout South America. And so South America gives us a good idea of what primitive anthropoid primates would look like. 4 million years ago, the Americas touched, and some of these would get to Costa Rica, et cetera. So these are anthropoid primates, the next in the family tree. Now, I want to go on. You want me to go on. But before I do, this is a philosophical point, if you don't mind my throwing this out. What's a good one? I know my monkeys are good. All right, we'll start here. Lemurs vary from each other. Some have rounder heads, some have, you know, bigger jaws, etc. I'm not sure you care. All right, some were actually pretty big, like almost our size. When humans first got to Madagascar, there were some ground lemurs which were about 5 feet tall. But the reason I'm bringing this up is here's a philosophical question for you. This is a replica of a female bonobo chimp, not human. This is an early member, not only of the genus Homo, but of Homo erectus, one of the early ones. All right. So there are some people who would argue, oh, I'm not sure if I want to call this human or whatever. Fine. I mean, you know, that's good. But as far as I know, no one doubts that, no one's ever said that Homo erectus wasn't human. We could put Homo habilis in the middle if we want. But my point is, between here, the chimp, and I apologize, sometimes I'm holding it up and thinking, everyone at home can clearly see me, but no, that doesn't. Somewhere between the chimp and Homo erectus is human. And when, at the end, when you get a chance to look at all of these, and I invite you to, you know, come in, pick these up, handle them. This is what separates humans from none. And I raise that because if we were to look at some of these lemur skulls, some are bigger than others, some have rounder craniums. Look, some of their brains are wrinkled, but some are smooth. Those are big differences. Not only do I say big differences, but how does that compare to the difference between human and non? So like this, these are South American monkeys, all right? So we have a marmoset and we have a howler, all right? They're biologically related. We've put them together. Even people who aren't the biggest fans of, you know, humans being related to anything else would say South American monkeys are related, having evolved from a common ancestor. Look how different they are compared to this. All right, and I'll do this a couple more times. And philosophically, it's just a question to ask yourself. All right, then how significant is this distinction, all right, between human and non, given the differences which exist between one elephant and another, one dog and another, and we can go on. But as exciting as those catarrhines are, I apologize. I think this is it. No, see, I always screw this up. Where's the singing? Keep missing it. All right, there's more singing, as you might imagine. In the next group, which we call the catarrhine primates. All right, there we go. I know it was. All right, so then within the anthropoids comes a new group by the Oligocene, that's the epoch after that, which includes old world monkeys, apes, and humans, but not new world monkeys. All right, so if we're putting people, you know, groups together, All right, old world monkeys belong in the group which has humans, and they first appear with catarrhine primates, which look like Egyptopithecus. And then we get old world monkeys. But once again, look how much they vary, right? These are old world monkeys. See the variation? And I actually just lied to you. I don't know if you would pick it up. One of them isn't an old world monkey. One of them's an ape. And if I ask my students, pick the one that's most different from the other, they usually don't say clearly the ape is different from the old world monkeys. They typically pick the baboon. And I say that because when I compare myself to some of the apes, I'll notice things like, my jaw doesn't stick out quite as far as theirs does. All right. But look at these guys. You know, my jaw difference between an ape is nothing compared to what the old world monkeys have done with jaw variation. So once again, how big is this difference when we consider the differences which we see among other groups? So that's a baboon, long face. There's the mandrill's long face. Okay. Lots of important things happened in this group. They get color vision by duplicating a gene on the X chromosome. So most mammals can't tell the difference between red and green, but from this point on, primates can. Also, something that you may not, the dental formula was changed. So one of the premolars was lost. So primates start with 3 premolars, but from this point on, there are only 2. So you have 2 in your mouth, premolars, the apes do, the old world monkeys do, all the other primates don't. One thing, when dogs meet each other, they sniff each other. All right. Lots of mammals do that. We don't. All right. So I apologize. I was kind of like eavesdropping and watching you guys as you came in. There was none of that. Or there was no sniffing going on. I saw some people wave, shake a fist bump or two. No sniffing, which is fine. Why not? Well, one of the reasons is you have 2 senses of smell. One of them is broken. All right. This one doesn't work. And that's the one that most mammals use to smell pheromones. All right. So when mammals smell each other, they learn so much about each other. We primates don't. This stopped working. So primates are becoming more and more visual, all right, less and less olfactory, the way that most mammals are, all right. Now, these old world monkeys, they're doing great, all right. However, there's a problem because monkeys can only get so big. I'm sorry. Monkeys can only get so big, and here's the reason. Imagine I'm a monkey running around doing my monkey stuff, all right? And I'm wondering, wait a minute, what's supporting my urinary and reproductive organs? And I say, oh, wait, yeah, that's right, pubic bones. The 2 pubic bones come together, fuse, and that gives these organs support. All right, I can continue on my monkey day running around, my organs are supported. But what happens if I want to hang or to stand? There's a problem. Now it's going to be shown here, but this shows it well enough. If you're going to run around on all 4s, these bones support your stuff. If you stand, sorry, I can usually do this. There we go. What's supporting your stuff? That's a hole. So see how the monkey is walking? It's walking on all 4s, so the pubic bones hold up its urinary and reproductive organs. If you're going to do this, that's a problem. You can't get too big because, not to be weird, but if I were to this, what is stopping my urinary and reproductive organs from hitting the floor? My skin? Like, do you feel comfortable with that? Your skin holding up your organs? No. So if we were to become upright, either hangers or eventually walkers, we had to do something. And the answer was lose the tail. That big fancy tail that the New World monkeys can use to hang with and hit their friends with. Like, oh, imagine if you had friends like that, how popular you'd be, how much fun you'd be at parties. Oh, like, why did we lose such cool tails? And the answer is because this tail, the coccyx, the remains of it, is not all that functional, but the muscles are. You've got muscles which used to wag the tail, which used to raise the tail. But now instead of wagging the tail, they form a sling, the pelvic diaphragm, which holds up yourself. Look at that gibbon. See it walking upright?
What's the
Monkeys
stomach?
can't do that. That's an ape. all right, because it lacks an external tail, and the muscles which used to move the tail now form this pelvic sling. Okay. Did someone at home have a question? Okay. Oh, someone here does. Yes. Siphacas can, yes. So some do. They would probably be limited in their size. And I'd have to look into, like, for example, the Siphacas specifically, which does a lot of jumping, what it's done to manage like that modified muscles to, you know, increase their breadth. One thing just to say, because that's an excellent point. I made this point with the mammals. The first mammals had a problem. How do you be warm-blooded and fertile since heat will kill sperm? How do you do that? All right. Well, mammals had to figure that out. I'm not saying that there's one answer. So, for example, you've never seen a scrotum on an elephant. All right. So elephants are warm-blooded, but the testes do not descend in the scrotum. Shrews, the same thing. Many bats, the same thing. So the most primitive mammal lineages, they didn't yet have that feature. Placental mammals, most of them, the way they solved it was to say the testes should be outside of the body where it's a little cooler. Birds figured out another way. You've never seen a scrotum on a Canada goose. So when evolution finds an answer to a problem, that doesn't mean another group couldn't solve it in a slightly different way. It would be interesting. I don't know how lemurs would do this, but the way that the apes got to be hangers, as the orangutans are, and they got to be so much bigger, was that they lost the external tail. So apes are a group within the catarrhines that first appear in the Miocene. At first, they're kind of small, all right, like the gibbons. All right. Then there are features which unite all the apes. Apes are biologically more closely related than to anything else. And so these gibbons walking across, these would be models of what a primitive ape would look like. Apes spread all throughout the world. You know, in that movie, Planet of the Apes, actually, it's already passed. All right. We used to have like 40 species of apes on planet Earth. Like Earth had a lot of apes. And as they spread out, then we have what are called the family Hominidae, all right, which excludes the gibbons, but includes orangutans, gorillas, and ourselves. All right, so these are sometimes called the higher apes. So orangutans are more closely related to us than they are to gibbons. All right, and there, you know, we can talk about gene sequences which show that. And then within the family Hominidae, there is a subfamily Homininae, all right, with gorillas, chimps, and humans, excluding the orangutans. So of the higher apes, orangutans are out. It's gorillas, chimps, and humans, which are more closely related to each other. Not only are they our closest biological relative, we are theirs. So just, you know, because there are many features where you can say, oh, they remind me of an orangutan this way. No, if we were to look, there are anatomical features which we share, genetic features that we share. Gorillas, they split, all right, probably 9 to 10 million years ago. And then we were left with only one non-human as our modern relative, the chimpanzee. There are two species of chimpanzee, the bonobos with the black face and the common chimpanzee with the feature face. So these are our closest relatives. We have so few genetic differences between them. So if you were to, here's just, you know, one example. Take hemoglobin, right, and say, if you were to take the amino acid sequence, when I make the protein hemoglobin, what amino acids do I put in what order? What does a chimp do? The exact same thing. What does a gorilla do? The exact same thing, except there's one difference. What does an orangutan do? Same thing, but there's two differences. All right, and then based on things like this, you can create these trees whose molecules are most closely related, and we could go on and on. Somewhere along the way, we talked about hybridization, and we'll be talking about having sex later on with the hominid species here. One of the things that separates groups is chromosome number. One of the reasons you don't have sex with them over there is because your kids wouldn't turn out all that great because you got different numbers of chromosomes. Look at the lemurs. Not, I mean, there's 4 families of lemurs. This family, some have 44 chromosomes, some have 62. This family, some have 46, some have 66. This family, some have 40, some have 70, 20, 38. So within the family, some of the species, they're not having sex because they have different numbers of chromosomes. Their kids wouldn't turn out that all that well, right? That's just within the lemurs. Within the New World monkeys, same thing, whole bunch of different kinds of chromosomes. The marmosets, there's 2 different kinds of chromosomes there. The Old World monkeys, same thing. Gibbons, not all gibbons have the same number of chromosomes. How do our human chromosomes compare to gorillas, chimps, and orangutans? Well, we have 46, they have 48. Why do they have 2 more? Well, because we have a big chromosome 2 in pink. They have a little chromosome that matches the top half of our chromosome 2. They have another chromosome that matches the bottom half. Somewhere since our lineage split with chimps, there was a chromosomal accident, all right? These things happen, where 2 smaller chromosomes smushed together. And starting at that point, it would be harder for hominins and for chimpanzees to have offspring together, because now one has 46 chromosomes, one has 48. We think that split happened about 6 million years ago. Now, as I tell this story, some of my telling, I'm sorry, the internet's doing something weird, is a little silly. And once, this was a great idea of mine. I don't think I ever like nailed it as far as putting it into practice. I thought it would be fun if all the hominins went to summer camp together and we could have like races against each other. You'll see a couple of them. I'm not quite sure the execution of this event was as good. But then the question is, if we have Camp Hominin, all right, there's different years. You could say, I went to Camp Hominin in 84, I went to Camp Hominin in 95. Who were the first ones there? Well, it turns out there are a couple of species which are the early ones. There is Ardipithecus, Sahelanthropus, and Auroran, all right? So we're going to talk about Australopithecus later, but they come later, all right? So as we're talking 5 to 7 million years ago, right, there are a bunch of species which pop up. Okay. Now, one of the interesting things in Sahelanthropus is, look, found in Chad, Central Africa. And if that doesn't mean anything to you, it's kind of exciting because since the Leakeys and the whole, Lucy stuff, everyone was digging in East Africa. Now, East Africa is a wonderful place to dig, a lot going on, but Africa is a huge continent. And it turns out that Sahelanthropus was from there. And then there was one of the early Australopithecus, the early Australopithecines, found also in Central Africa. So for a long time, people weren't maybe digging in as broad an area as they should have. So who knows what we'll continue to find. The birthplace of our lineage might have been a little broader range than just East Africa. East Africa, there's this big rift, which is just like Baja California is slowly being pushed away and will leave North America and will be its own little island someday. East Africa, the same thing. East Africa is not going to remain part of Africa forever. It's like tectonic plates are pushing it away. So there's this big rift valley, and that was an important part for hominin evolution. All right. So who are these early members? This, Auroran, Sahelanthropus, et cetera. Oh, I'm already in Australopithecus. Well, their skulls were tiny, all right? And so they are certainly not, oh yeah, we'll get back to you. So if we were to look at Auroran, our lineage did not get smart first. So like, I don't know, maybe it's a little conceited, but we think like, oh, I'm so smart. I'll bet you that's what separated us from the non-humans, that our lineage said, let's get smarter. No, that came later. Upright walking came first. All right, upright walking was the priority. And Auroran has some modifications to its thigh, which humans have in chimps don't, which would have affected that. Sahelanthropus, its skull is so badly crushed. That's the darker one on this table. So Sahelanthropus, its skull is so badly crushed. The question is, where is this hole? They interpreted it as a hole suggests upright walking. But the skull, when skulls are badly crushed, you hate to say too much on it. So we'll get back to that hole in a little bit. But Auroran, we have more complete fossils of. Oh, I'm sorry, my fault. Ardipithecus, I'm reading the text. There are two species of Ardipithecus, and Ardipithecus was far better at upright walking than chimps were. Not as good as Australopithecus and nowhere near as good as you, but there's a progression here. It's trying to walk upright. The canines are getting smaller. So like male apes are kind of scary, right? Like gorillas, chimpanzees, big canines for fighting. We hominins less. And so here, this is bigger than my canine, right? But it's smaller than the other ones. These, if you were to look at the hips, etc., this is bipedal some of the time. All right. So it can go quadrupedal as well. Not on its knuckles the way the chimps and gorillas do, but on its palms. There were no modifications of the fingers to suggest that. So it probably lived among huge trees and walked on the branches. All right. It could go down on all four limbs sometimes, but it could walk bipedally as well. Once again, not great at it compared to us, but we're not around yet. It's really good at being bipedal compared to everything else, which is around at the time. Okay, so if this were Camp Hominin, the early years, we could ask, where are they living? All right, Ardipithecus, two species known from there. All right, we'll get to, Sahelanthropus was in there. All right. Now let's get to the next set of years. All right, Camp Hominin number 2, and now we get into the Australopithecines. Okay. Now, when I was doing the whole, wouldn't this be a fun summer camp thing? One of the things I thought, wouldn't it be fun if you took like one of your friend's skulls and threw it up against the wall and it hit there where your cranial volume was. So you could see like how much space for brain was in this. If we were to do that, when chimpanzees do that, their skull range, their brain range is in here, 400 to 500 cc's, or cubic centimeters. So once again, if you're a chimp, you throw your skull against the wall, it goes here. So on these early members of Camp Hominin, they throw their skulls against the wall. Where is it? All right, still modern chimp range. All right. So once again, it's maybe a tiny bit bigger than an average chimp's, but it's still kind of like an average chimp's, right? So when we hold up Lucy, all right, this would be Afarensis, the species which made Lucy. The brain is still within chimp range. They did not get smart first, all right? Africanus, so there's a whole bunch of Australopithecines, but the story is mostly the same until you get to the robust chewing ones, which we'll see, right? So the brain size, that is not what's impressive about Lucy. The canines are a little smaller. That's cool. Not totally impressive. But what is impressive is things like this hole, right? If you were to look at this hole, you say, clearly things have changed. This is where the spinal cord comes into the brain. If this were a chimp, instead of being here, it would be here. You're not impressed because you're thinking, that's just an inch. Yeah, but the inch means something, because if my skull moved the hole an inch, I would not be standing like this. I would be standing like this and now using my hands for locomotion. I would be primarily quadrupedal. But when you look at this thing is bipedal. All right, sure, I'm sure it could like go on all fours. I mean, I can go on all fours sometimes. Like, I'm sure it would have been better than me, but it is primarily bipedal. This hole tells me that. So, a bunch of other things tell you that. If you study the structure of its knee, the structure of the hip joint, the lower back vertebrae, all of these, this species had features which say that it was bipedal. So once again, our lineage, getting smart was not the first priority. And when I say not the first priority, you're thinking, why wouldn't it be the first priority? I'll get to this, but let me just kind of sow a seed. Brains are expensive. And if you say, like, why doesn't more things just have big brains? Because they can't afford it. And I say this is a serious thing to say, so I'll say it. Last time I read UN estimates, it was that 40,000 people will die today of hunger or a hunger-related disease. It is so expensive to get a big-brained, 100-degree, upright walking human body through a day that tens of thousands of people today won't. All right. These individuals, all right, they don't have fire yet. All right. So as far as the only way they could get a big brain is if they could support it with more and better foods. And these are kind of just, I'm sorry for people, I'll show these. So feel free to check these out as you look. The world's a scary place. Why can't they just get more food? Well, because these things are out there. All right. There are cats. I mean, when you think of cats, you're not thinking of this. Right. But there are bears out there. All right. So here's a bear. All right. Here's another bear, short-faced bear. All right, the world's a scary place. And so when they do get to a carcass or a kill, they eat as much as they can and then they make it back up to the trees because those things are coming. Right. So getting enough nutrition to feed a growing brain, we're going to have to put that on hold for a little bit. Okay. So getting walking upright is a bit of is the first priority. Now, when I look at, oh, and here's like, this was the cover of Science, or Ardipithecus once was, so that's kind of cool pictures. Right. Here's a problem that I have in presenting this, which will come up again and again. I look at that, and help me out. I mean, you guys have any insight? Who could have sex with whom? The reason that becomes an issue is when we name things, it's based on that. These things have sex. All right. So this is Australopithecus afarensis. Is this a slightly different Australopithecus afarensis, members of the same species that could have sex and have kids? Or did they not have sex? All right. And they're different species, just as like wolves and coyotes are different species, just like, red-start warblers and yellow rump warblers are different species. Are these different species? Well, if you just have their bones, like some of the most obvious ways we could check are not available to us, it's a guess. Now, some things, well, we found these like, 400,000 years earlier than these. So as far as we can tell, they didn't overlap. Okay, so if you didn't live in the same time, you didn't have sex. Okay, that's one. This one lived in this part of Africa. This one lived in that part of Africa. Okay, that might help. But after a certain point, these are guesses by the experts. And experts vary. There are lumpers who say, you know what, I think this is one big variable species. And then there are splitters who would tend to say, I think these are different species. Same thing with the birds. Some people say, oh, I think these are subspecies of one species. Another birder comes up and is like, nah, I call those two different species. And that's okay. We don't have to agree. Science is about new ideas and challenging, et cetera. My point is, I'm not going to go crazy on this species name, that species name, et cetera, because we're not quite sure who could have sex with whom. We're not quite, sure whether the next analysis based on new fossil find will have new species. Okay. But we do break this group into the glacial ones and the robust ones. So there's a bunch of these, all right? And so this one, the authors didn't even call Australopithecus, they called it Kenyanthropus. Should it be Kenyanthropus? Should it be Australopithecus? Once again, semantics. Let's not argue about that. We have the glacial ones, all right? And then we have the robust ones. Now, the glacial ones, that's our lineage. We'll get back to that. But there's robust ones, all right? Now, by robust, I mean their lower jaws are so big. Their teeth are so thick. Whatever it is they were trying to chew was really hard to chew, all right? So once again, that whole, how do you get a bigger body, a bigger brain? You're going to have to feed it. And so this group, they just got better at chewing things, probably roots, spending more time on the ground than up in the trees eating fruits and leaves. Now on the ground, where they would like be digging up more roots and things like this. These are the robust Australopithecines. All right. There are at least 3 different kinds of these. Once again, I don't want to get into, oh, here's Ethiopicus, here's Robustus, here's Boisier, because once again, who could have sex with whom? Is this a different species, or is just that the female of the male? Because when you look at gorillas or orangutans, there's a lot of sexual dimorphism going on, more so than there is with humans, with one being a little bigger, or the canines being a little bigger. So when you find a different fossil, is it really a different species, or is it just the opposite gender of the one that was found before, or whatever? Brains are getting bigger though. That's outside chimp range, just barely, all right? But that is now getting outside chimp range. Now, these are our cousins. They are not our direct ancestors. So notice that when these robust Australopithecines were to throw their skulls up against the wall, just a little bit bigger than chimps, all right? But they're eating differently. Maybe that's giving them the more calories to support that bigger brain. All right. So there's a lot of different Australopithecines, all right? And that's great. But I would really like to use a new word. All right. And the word I'd like to use is the word homo. Um, uh, Almost 3 million years ago, a new set of fossil finds were discovered that had a flatter face, but this is rounder, right? This species is clearly trying to add more brain. Now, it's still close to chimp range, but it's definitely trying to go up. So like, if you look here, like that's higher than Australopithecus is, all right? Laterally, like look how wide that is. Look how wide that is, and that is. So these individuals are trying to have more brain space. So around 2.5 million years ago, we have a new group and we call it Homo. We found tools in association with them. Now, it is possible that Australopithecus used tools. You know, there's some sites that suggest that. Maybe even fire, maybe, probably. Like, I don't think yes, but maybe. But by now we are definitely using tools. So the larger brain and the tool use indicated that we should. I'm sorry, this is probably a little. Is Homo habilis in there? I forget who's throwing the wall. No, that's the next group. Okay. So Homo habilis, great. Once again, I look at those skulls. I don't know if they could have sex. So do we split Homo habilis into 2 or 3 different groups? All right. Or do we say like, are these, I'm sorry, there's another one. Oh, okay, that table. So is this one and this one, do they have sex? Are they one species? Or are they different species? I don't know. I can't tell if they could have sex. So that's, you can argue it if you want. I don't think it's overly important, but just so you know, no one says we know all of the answers. This is how it happened. Still trying to figure it out. And one of the things that was a surprise was that we thought it, you know, maybe a little conceit, that it would be a tree leading to us. All right. So they're like, oh, look, step by step, getting closer to us and closer to us. But now we see now it was a bush. All right. So when these things spread out, they just, oh, here's a branch of the family tree. Here's a branch. Here's a branch. Some got thick jaws. Some looked over here, looked like this. One of the branches would lead to us, but the other ones didn't. All right. And so is like this one leading to that one, or they're just lots of species running around at the same time, like warblers. How many different species of warblers will be coming through the spring? A bunch. So you can have different species, all right, and it doesn't have to just be one lineage. And there was a time where there were lots of humans around, not just the lineage which would lead to us. But then 2 million years ago comes and something changes. All right. Now we have another group of we call Homo. All right. This we call Homo erectus. Now, the first group at the camp walked upright better than chimps. Homo habilis walked up, I'm sorry, Australopithecus walked upright better than the first group. Homo habilis walked better than the next group. But Homo erectus is the first one that is like you from the neck down. It would be hard to tell the difference between us and Homo erectus from the neck down. You could, but they could run. They could not only run, they could do endurance running. Like their hips look like ours. Like Homo habilis could walk upright, but you would have beat them in a race. Homo erectus would have given you a run for your, like they would have run like you. So for the first time, they're not just bipedal, but they're good at it. Okay. And their brains start getting bigger. Now, I like my species, I really do. We've been successful, but we've been around for 200 to 300,000 years. One person thinks 400,000. That could be right. But so there, Homo erectus is around from almost 2 million years ago, and it went extinct about 40,000. So Homo erectus had the planet, was on the planet for almost 2 million years. We've been here for like 300,000. So in that measure of success, Homo erectus did pretty good. That's a long time. And if you were to ask how big are their brains, the question, well, 2 million years is a long time. All right. Are you talking about the last ones? Because the last ones are really close to the blue modern human range. See how close they're getting? That's a big brain. The first ones, however, all right, like the ones found in Central Asia, and I'll get to that in a second, a little bit smaller. All right, so there's not just this one range. All right, so here we have it. That's chimp range. That's modern human range. Clearly well above chimp range, but also clearly not within modern human range. So Homo erectus is something new. All right, and for the first time, we now have definite evidence of not only spreading throughout Africa, which is huge, but also leaving Africa and now being in Central Asia. So Homo georgicus could be called the Homo erectus found in Central Asia among the first ones. And there's different skulls here. So we could even then ask, is Homo georgicus one thing? Is it a subspecies of Homo erectus? Once again, I don't want to kind of get into to that. Okay. Then Homo erectus spreads all over. So I've got a bunch of Homo erectus on this table. If you've ever heard the name Java man or Peking man, what that's referring to is Homo erectus that was found in Java or Homo erectus found in China. So Homo erectus is spreading throughout Africa. It's spreading throughout Asia. In fact, Java, right? This skull, like maybe only like tens of thousands of years ago, this might have rubbed elbows with Homo sapiens. Now, are we just splitting hairs? Is this really modern people? Well, no. All right. And two things leap out to me. So for example, all right. So I don't want to overestimate like the size of a big head. I mean, because like mice are smarter than crocodiles. Crocodiles have far bigger heads than mice. All right. So having a big head doesn't necessarily make you smart. It can help, but it's like how many nerve cells you have. So how wrinkled your brain is. You could have a smaller skull and have a wrinkled brain. So Homo erectus brains get bigger. By the end, the one I just set down, pretty big brain. Neanderthals, as big as mine, if not bigger. I mean, here's Homo sapiens. I know we never talked about it. All right. Here's Homo sapiens. Here's Neanderthal. That's a bigger skull. There's a new species that I had never heard of called Juluensis that's even bigger than this. All right. So hominid skulls are varying. So there are hominids that have bigger skulls, but Homo erectus has a big skull, but it's shaped differently. All right. It's got this big eyebrow ridge, but it doesn't have a forehead. So if all of us do this, we're all kin. We're all the species. There's a whole bunch of species of Homo out there, but we're all the same. And just touching here tells you that. We've got the foreheads, and the other groups, they didn't. Their skulls were low and long. They were smart, all right? They had fire, as I'll get to, all right? But their skulls were shaped differently. I don't know what that would have done. I would just be guessing if I could. But knowing that right behind my hand is the part of the human brain that does the most complex thought, that has the prefrontal cortex, that has the idea of like past, present, future, what's socially acceptable, conscience, and a lot of those things. The fact that changing the shape of the skull had to have affected the part of the brain that was right here. I don't know what it would have done, but I, had to have done something. So there was that. Okay. Homo erectus uses fire. Fire changes everything. All right. I mean, there's the obvious one. Now you can be active at night. You can shoo away predators, etc. But one of the most important things is what it does to your meals. All right. Because when you cook your food, you start to denature the proteins. So if you were to eat cooked meat versus raw meat, the cooked meat eaters will get far more nutrition than the raw meat. It's hard to digest raw meat, a lot easier to digest cooked meat. And then you get all the roots. I mean, you know that. I mean, like first thing you do with roots is you cook them. You don't eat a raw potato or a mandioc or whatever. You cook it first. So by cooking stuff, there's all of these calories, also all of this protein available, all right, which means you can now start powering bigger brains. So fire precedes the brain getting into modern human ranges. All right. And, so I talk about fire a little bit. One other thing is just, I know you don't worry about this, right? But billions of people right now have worms living in them. All right. There are lots of parasites, and eating raw foods, good way to get worms. These are parasitic worms in their eggs. Cooking kills a lot of those. So now, not only are you getting more food for your developing brain, you have fewer parasites taking the nutrients that your brain would otherwise get. All right. So notice it's not just like, hey, wouldn't it be great to have a bigger brain? You have to be able to feed it. And fire was huge in doing that. Now, I've traveled a bit in my day, but I've never walked from like one continent to another. So the fact that now not only is the species in Africa, but now spreading into Asia, into Southern Asia, et cetera, these are really good at upright walking and endurance running. Right. So they're occurring in more open habitats, and for the first time would be capable of endurance running. Now, I'm going to say something as a reference, but like I've, when I was younger, I ran a couple marathons. I don't think I could do anything like that today. But just that alone is weird. What animals run 26 miles at a clip? Horses do. Not many. So you might say, oh, humans, we're not that good at running, right? Because that deer, that four-footed deer, it would like run away so fast. Yeah, but we would catch up. And then it would run away. And we would catch up. Another thing that we do that most animals don't is we sweat to cool down. Most animals don't. All right. Deer don't. All right. And so if you live in a hot place, you just keep running after the four-footed thing. And after a while, it just drops of exhaustion. All right. So this isn't faster than the antelope and the deer. All right. But in hot environments, it's better in many cases. You will catch up to them, and this exhausted animal is just laying there. You don't have to wrestle with it. You can just slit its throat. All right. As modern humans have done. All right. So Homo erectus is now an endurance runner. Now, this changes lots of things. Like you get to new places, what do you find? Like, oh, well, you're finding all these cave bears. When the big cave bears when you get to Europe. When you go to Asia, there's Gigantopithecus, this big ape, which we think stood 20 feet tall. So if you want to hang out in the caves, you've got company there. Just like Jason Voorhees. So we have, this would have provided new challenges. But you have time in 1.5 million years. Homo erectus, when they first have hunting remains, they're hunting crocodiles, these big things that just lay there. Only later are they hunting the running mammals. So they had time to improve their hunting skills. They didn't have to be really good at first. Homo erectus, as it spreads all over the place, one of the most dramatic things that we see is hey, all right, where's Flores? Floresansis? Does anyone see a really small skull? Oh, okay. No, okay, I'm sorry, that's a given. All right, I'm sorry. It's like everything. I'm sure it's like right here. Are these in the case? I'm sure it's here somewhere. Anyway, it looks like this. So one population of Homo erectus gets to the island of Flores, and the adults would now grow to be about 3 feet tall. All right, so that's not a child, that's an adult human. All right, and on this island, they had giant monitor lizards like the Komodo dragons, only bigger. They had dwarf elephants, so their life would have been quite different. But just kind of showing, like, as our ancestors spread out, they changed. All right, so there's clearly a lot of variation in this group. Yes. It was a Homo erectus population as far as we can tell. Yeah, so Homo sapiens hasn't come about yet. Yes. So, and we would have said because of its size difference and its isolation on the island, feel confident in saying, let's call it a different species, that it wasn't interacting with the mainland Homo erectus. But then there is more, all right, because then from this group, we start finding more fossils. So Homo antecessor, all right, in Western Europe, 1.2 million years ago. All right, and I'm going to start once again coming up with all of these names. Who had sex with who? I don't know. So is Homo antecessor, Homo heidelbergensis, Homo ergaster, where do we, draw the lines? Like, is this a really big-brained Homo erectus, or should we give this another name, Homo rhodesiensis? Once again, that's not why we're here today. We had a family bush. There were a lot of us. There were a lot of different groups of Homo because it's a big planet. The ones over here in Southeast Asia were different from these in Africa, which were different from these over in Europe, etc. Okay. And so we have Heidelbergensis, all right, there in Europe. Okay. As we start to get into the home stretch, one thing I haven't mentioned that deserves a talk all on its own, but we're not going to fit it in tonight, is some climate chaos. There have been very few ice ages in Earth's history, very few, at least in the past 500 million years. One of the things that makes an ice age apparent is if water has trouble moving around the planet. As long as water can move freely, cold water from over here can go to the hot zones, hot water from over here go to the cold zones. It distributes the heat of the planet, and you don't get ice at the poles. Dinosaurs never saw ice at the poles. All right. But as a result, sea level was much higher. Most of Florida was underwater. But as we're approaching the modern day, a couple of things happen. Antarctica, which used to be connected to Africa, all right, is now at the South Pole, blocking the movement of water. So the South Pole is cold, is going to stay cold because there's no water current that's going to take the cold away. The North Pole is now becoming ringed because North America has this big fat part that has Europe, and then Asia has this big fat part. Sure, there's a couple little things like a Bering Strait, but for the most part, water has trouble leaving the cold North Pole and going along. And then 4 million years ago, the nail in the coffin, Central America rises and fuses the Americas. And now you just can't have water going laterally this way. So water's having trouble moving, and all of a sudden it gets cold, all right, because of these ice ages. And there's a series of them, all right? We name them as these like ice sheets advance and they retract. At the height of the last one, the amount of snow out here outside this window would have been about 1/3 of a mile straight up. All right, that's a lot of ice to go from here to the North Pole. All right, so then it would extend. So there would be a time that would be colder, then warmer, then colder, and then there would be a time where the interglacials would actually be warmer than it is now, and sea levels would rise up to this point. All right, and then when it would get cold in the ice sheet, then sea levels would fall down to that point. So sea level was going up and down and up and down. All right, there were different ice ages. We have named the last two the Illinoisan from its remains in Illinois, and the Wisconsinian being the last one. Its last glacial maximum, its greatest extent, was around 20,000 years ago. So it wasn't until around 12,000 years ago that the ice which was outside the window started to retract. In that background, Homo heidelbergensis was isolated and gave us the Neanderthals, which were now trapped in the snowbound Europe. And lots of animals that live in the cold get bigger and wider so they don't lose heat as well. And the Neanderthals, they tend to do that. They were just kind of big in their digits, just broader parts of their skulls, broader. And their skull's pretty big. Actually, their average cranial volume a little bit bigger than modern Homo sapiens. All right. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean smarter. When Homo sapiens gets to Europe, their tools get better much faster than the Neanderthals do. All right, that's a separate story. So we have them, and then we have a group in Central Asia called the Denisovans. There's a cave in an area called Denisova, where they had found a few bones, but they got DNA. And when they compared the DNA, they said, this is not human, and this is not Neanderthal. It is a separate species, all right? So between 1 and 200,000 years ago, there's a bunch of Homo species around. Homo erectus is still in Southeast Asia and Java. Homo floresiensis there. Denisovans are there. Neanderthals in there. Who knows how many other groups? There's a new group that was just discovered, Junuensis, in Asia that we don't know much about. That Africa gives us a new member of the human family tree, sapiens. So starting in Africa at least 300,000 years ago, maybe a little earlier, our species arises. Now, let me just say a few words. Not only did Homo arise in Africa, not only did hominins arise in Africa, but Homo sapiens did. And as far as we can tell, all right, and I was just handed a newspaper clipping which suggests that there's fossils that I don't know of, so that would be interesting. I'd like to read up on those. That if Homo sapiens is in Africa 300,000 years ago, they don't really leave Africa in force until getting to the Middle East 70 some and getting to Europe 40 some. So it means most of the history of our species is Africa only. Now, maybe new finds, say like, oh, no, it's a little more complicated than that. But one of the things that jumps up there is if you were to take modern human populations, all right, and say, all right, let's compare their genes and let's say who's most closely related. Because humanity spent so much time in Africa only, the deepest branches of the human family tree are in Africa. So let's just say here is an individual from this lineage of the human family tree from Africa. Here's another individual, same. Here's another individual, same. Then here's an individual who comes from the group which left to be the Middle East, etc. This individual from Africa is far more closely related to this individual who lives in China than this individual is from this individual. It's often been said, like if you start comparing human genomes, if you have two people living in Nigeria who live 100 miles apart, they could be less closely related to each other genetically than someone from England and China. All right, but that's just a testament to how long humanity spent in Africa. What happened? Well, let me just kind of sum up really quickly. I've got lots of side little things. So here's Romeo-Pithecus and Julipithecus, where and Neanderthal and Homo erectus are mouthing this. And when you ask the question, like, if they had a chance for interspecies love, like the Montagues and the Capulets, would they go for it? But we don't have time, okay? So if you were to take, all right, so let me ask a question. I'm going to ask the same question on 3 continents. I'm going to start with Africa, ask the question. I'm going to go to Asia, ask the same question, go to Europe, ask the same question. Where do modern Africans come from? And the reason I say that is because if we were to name all the species, and remember there's all these different names we can give to species, we have different names for species of Homo living in Africa. So did A, Homo sapiens appear and completely replace the other ones? The other one's gone, Homo sapiens, the only one left standing, all modern Africans come from Homo sapiens. Or that would be called the replacement theory. Or did they interbreed, called regional continuity, all right, where, as geographic range spread, members of this group then, met with members of that group, okay, and that modern Africans would now be descended from multiple separate groups, all right? That's a second possibility. Same question in India. Where do modern Indians come? All right? Or I'm sorry, it's an Indian statue. Where did modern Asians come? Well, there were lots of Homo living in Asia. So did Homo sapiens get there 70,000 years ago, wipe the rest out so that all Asians come only from Homo sapiens? Or that would be the replacement theory. Or when Homo sapiens gets to Asia, did it interbreed with some of the species which had already been there for like 1 million years? And so that modern Asians would then have inherited traits from both of those. When Homo sapiens gets to Europe 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals were there. Who knows, maybe, remnants of another group, all right? What happened? Did Homo sapiens wipe Neanderthals out, replace them? Or was there interbreeding to give modern Europeans? Anatomically, replacement carries the day. I mean, look at our foreheads, look at our bills. Like if I was Neanderthal, I'd have, significantly, I'd have thicker digits, etc. Look at this forehead. We are primarily Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens primarily replaced the others. But I said primarily. Does that mean entirely? Well, I'll just talk about myself and then I'll just get to everybody else and then we'll wrap up. Take a second, look at me. Just take a second, look at me. And ask yourself this question. Does it look as if his ancestors had sex with another species? Ask that question. Don't tell me the answer. Well, if you do 23andMe, and I have, and they say, all right, in your genome, can we find Neanderthal genes? So we have Neanderthal DNA, and now we can look at your DNA and say, do you have any of those? Turns out not only do I do, all right, but not to brag, slightly more than normal. Just saying. All right. So, yeah, I am primarily Homo sapiens, but just like, the wolves and dogs interbreed and sometimes still mate. The blue-winged warblers and the golden-winged warblers are still interbreeding and make hybrids. That has happened in our ancestry as well. In fact, it happened with another species that we have recently discovered. And when I say this, just let me be clear. What I'm about to show you is incomplete because we only have DNA from 3 sources: humans, Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, and Denisovans who lived in Central Asia. Look at all of these. If we had DNA from all of them, we could paint a more complete picture, but we can't. So we only have 3 things that we can look at. If we were to ask this modern African, which DNA do you have? Homo sapiens, Neanderthal, or Denisovan? 100% Homo sapiens. If we ask this average European, what DNA do you have? Mostly Homo sapiens, but look at that, 1 or 2% Neanderthal, typical in Europeans. We were to ask this Asian, maybe 2% Neanderthal, more typically 1, all right? Ooh, but 1% Denisovan, who lived in Central Asia. In fact, they lived at high altitude, and maybe the Tibetans who live in Asia at high altitude adapted to it because they actually got the genes that their Denisovan branch of the family tree gave them, who had already been living at high altitude. And if you go to New Guinea, there you can find individuals who 5 to 8% of their DNA is Denisovan. So as Homo sapiens spread throughout the globe, all right, that species dominated. We are primarily Homo sapiens, you and I. But there was some interbreeding with the other species that they met. And then perhaps some of the regional differences we find in human populations reflects that, because before Homo sapiens spread, there was Homo for 2 million years on planet Earth, and lots of different populations of all these different traits. Yeah. Good question. And actually, this will kind of be the last point of the day. So getting to Central Asia by 70,000 years ago, maybe earlier. And they seem to colonize twice, Homo sapiens to Asia. They seem to get to the Middle East once, but then the Neanderthals kicked them out. Like they're there in the Middle East and then they're gone, and Neanderthals are back, and then Homo sapiens comes back. So by 70,000 years ago, they were spreading with the intent to spread Europe by 40,000 years ago. It used to be thought they got to the Americas, give or take 10. But then recently we realized now probably closer to 20. Because as the ice sheet advanced, sea level dropped so much that you could walk from Alaska to Asia. That's how elephants got here, and that's how horses went to Asia, and that's how humans got here. In fact, this is a true story. If you were to go to Lookout Mountain in southern Orange County, a faculty member here named Barry Cass, who taught sociology for the longest time, was part of a dig that helped to find an atlatl point, which is an ancient spear thrower, which was dated 12,000 years old. So it was thought that Native Americans first got here 10,000 years ago, but then it was shown, no, in Orange County, New York, they've been here at least 12,000 years. And well, now we know they were in southern Chile before that. And if you go to White Sands National Park, all right, they had just made a discovery. I'm sorry, I'll show you. I'll show you that's what White Sands National Park in the southern southwestern United States looks like. I think New Mexico. I forget when I was there. They say footprints dated from 20 to 23,000 years ago. So the Americas were colonized last of the large continents here. So as I study life, when we look at all of this, so much great biodiversity, so many wonderful stories about how that life got to be the way it is. But our story was worth telling as well. So this lecture attempted to start at the ancestors of primates, just after the dinosaurs became extinct, and end at ourselves. Now, next week, we'll walk up the staircase of time Unfortunately, there are some other things that could be mentioned about this moment in time that we currently find ourselves, which we can touch on next week. Like there have been times in mass extinction in the Earth's history, like rocks falling out of the sky, big volcanoes. We're currently living in a mass extinction, but the cause of it isn't the extinction of the volcanoes or the rock, it's us. And so talking about the Anthropocene, a new geologic era, just trying to mark the significance of human on the planet. We'll touch on that again next time as well. If anyone would like to, look at these skulls for a little bit, you're welcome to. Other than that, thank you all for coming, and we'll see some of you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sure.
Where did Sagittal Crest go?
So the sagittal crest, where I don't know that it went anywhere. Some hominids had it, and that makes it really good for jaw muscles. So if you want to chew your food, right, that's something we're like really intent on chewing their food. That would get the jaw muscle. Or for males attacking other males, right? So like if you're gonna have this fearsome fight, like a big crest for your jaw muscles. Our lineage never had that. Or the gorillas had it, and some of the robust Australopithecus had it. Our lineage, I don't think ever really had it. Yeah. Sorry, this is Flores. I don't know why I didn't see it, but I never seen it. Oh, okay. Yes, okay, I'm sorry.
What are we evolving into?
I'm sorry.
What are we evolving into?
So here's a good question, and I will give it my best. What are we evolving into? Well, and part of it is like let's take big brains. Like, oh, are we getting bigger brains? Like bigger heads. Well, I don't know. One, we'd have to feed it, and we already have population, and our population is growing and growing. So food's going to become harder to provide. But also, just, big heads aren't all the big thing. Like, think about the growth process. This head has to fit for the female pelvic canal. And so it's not just, big brains are like, there's all of these trade-offs that and a lot of it is interacting with the environment. So there are lineages that have gotten smart, lineages that have gotten smarter, like intestinal parasites, they've lost most of their brain. Why? Because if they're living in an intestine, how smart do they have to be? So what will future humans be doing? What will be the adaptation that helps them live better? We don't know what the future looks like yet. So they would certainly change over time, but how they would change. What do you say?
AI will replace the need for
like in robots. Yeah, that's all. That may be where we're going.
That's what my son is studying. Said he's very discouraged by all these learning about. I think he did say it. They will take our that sort of thing, and we won't do it. AI will do it, but they'll get tired of taking care of us. It doesn't part of the collect by because of life forever, and we will still have retardability, but place
Some people have commented, like we're already on the way because, like, look at me. There are lots of things I can't do until I put this on. I'm like, ooh, now I can't. Or like, you have an artificial hip or an artificial, like, there's already I'm an enhanced human.
Many years ago, there was a commercial where we was a head talking and he would say, J12, I want to leave. It's something you go over to think about. J12 was there. He was just but that's where my son says it's going. It's going to still think it's going to go. It's going to live forever. Well, I think that's maybe
say hello. Yeah, so yes, yeah, I think there's only a skull. I think there's only a skull.
Oh my God, right?
That's What's the one next to it?
The cat,
Yes.
sharp one.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
It's like a saber tooth tiger.
So you're right. So the first one to get out of chip range would be robust.
They do look like. Very white one.
Superhuman. I don't know if there's a human.
This one, right here. Isn't this a human?
Yeah.
I'm afraid to pick it up.
I'm sure there's another one around. Oh, no, no.
So that even though the absolute size is smaller, surface area, animal number. But we don't have that quality of ended gas velocity. So. Yeah.
I have a question. I noticed that like. Primates. Very more pronounced or very large proportion of ours as we get. So whatever. Is that like. Food, we call it food prepping.
So some of that is, some people have argued that we get more muscular jaws if we ate more fibrous food. So like part of this actually might be more. Part of this is, primates, especially the males, they fight to have this big jaws. But then having big canines is probably what I should. So that got reduced. So that was probably. Also, this is a huge. I always try to make it my class. I asked my students, what's the most important part of your anatomy? Name the part. Like,
This is part of the research.
but it turns out chips. This, you can't make the this.
So I throw the research off.
The area where the.
Yeah, really, if you just find mine.
The pharynx.
And then
So
find
now.
5.2, they must have two
I'm
different.
sure like just reducing this like chemical might have had some disadvantages, but it's all about power.
And also, you don't really need it like big jaws, like crush or something like tails. When you have toes.
No.
Good night, everyone. I was talking to people. Sure. Sure.
Is that yours actually? What
Yeah.
do you- What is that called? That's your DNA? No, what was that with all the?
Oh, yeah, my 23andMe chart. Like if you get 23andMe, I think you spit in a cup and you give them $100 and they come back and they say, oh, you have a predisposition to this. You probably like this food and you have this much Neanderthal in you.
And it's 23 what?
23andMe
And
and me.
me.
Yeah, they might have just gone out of business, I think, but like for a long time, that was a
What is
big
that
thing.
called? So what is that?
Yeah, so what's your DNA? And so you like, we were doing it for loved ones, like, oh, I give you a 23andMe. So you spit in a cup, you
Yep.
send it away and they give you like a little
I've done that,
report.
yeah.
Oh, your ancestors come from this part of the world.
Yeah, you can do that.
Oh.
National Geographic offers that and 23andMe and a number of other ones too. But I just want to let you know, I drove for the Valley Taxi in Kenya.
Oh, uh-huh,
Yeah, so little Peugeots. You know,
uh-huh.
And I was a safari driver and.
Oh, I'm sure that'd be a great story.
And I actually made a delivery to the Leakeys.
Oh, really?
Wasn't that interesting? I mean, it's all right though. Oh. Yeah. Shit. Did you go off? Turn it off. Okay. All right. Yeah, even on off finally. Ready? Yeah.